If you consider yourself a massive fan of Shadow of the Colossus and use the internet more than the average human, I'm almost 100% certain that you have heard of a YouTube user named Nomad Colossus. As much as it pains fans like me to say it, Nomad will eternally and objectively be the biggest fan of the game. No other person has done more for the SOTC fan community than Nomad. He has inspected the code of the game for several years, uncovering secrets and mysteries that leave us in a perpetual state of blissful wonder. Whether it's his investigation of omitted colossi or discovery of hidden cutscenes, Nomad is persistently finding ways to evoke our curiosity about this game's enigmatic yet enchanting universe. On March 18th, 2019, Nomad posted a video titled PSU Preview New Cutscene. The video displays a discovery made by somebody named Wisi. Hidden away in the demo disc's code was a placeholder cutscene, meant to be triggered after a Colossus was defeated. However, before release, the cutscene was disabled by the demo's developers. In order to see it, Wisi had to manually activate it. What follows is a series of 22 images. To most people, it might seem like there's nothing obviously important about these images. Like I said, they were intended as a placeholder for the actual animation that occurs upon defeating a Colossus, when we see the sphere of light shining in the darkness. However, after I researched the images and their origin, I think I found something that would allow me to continue Nomad's tradition of digital archaeology. At first, I recognized the circular shape of the images in other forms of art, but also in a psychology text I recently finished. It's a famous text by Carl Jung called The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious. In the text, there was an entire segment dedicated to a particular type of symbol called a mandala. Though it originates from Hindu and Buddhist cultures, mandalas are cross-cultural works of art. You've likely seen them everywhere. They normally take the form of a circle and contain varying illustrations within. Mandalas are meant to symbolize wholeness, the mathematical harmony of the universe and our relationship to it. After observing the mandalas contained within Jung's text, I find myself noticing them everywhere, from placemats to cathedrals, but most recently, I recognized them in this cutscene. I left a comment on Nomad's video explaining that I think the images are mandalas. Moreover, I included Carl Jung's observation that mandalas symbolize how both individuals and the universe at large are trying to reconcile opposites. For instance, light and darkness, consciousness and unconsciousness, good and evil, chaos and order. In respect to a human being, Jung noted that the mandalas emerge in our minds and in our art during moments of personal growth. This was especially the case with many of his patients, who drew mandalas during their therapy sessions, many of which were documented in Jung's aforementioned text. They symbolize a rebalancing in our psyche, a balancing of conscious contents and unconscious contents, of our inner tendencies towards good and evil. Once this rebalancing took place, the human being would experience great therapeutic value. With all of this said, many of you might be wondering how these mandalas and their symbolism fit into Shadow of the Colossus. Well, in case you didn't notice, there are mandalas everywhere in the game. Let's run down the list. At the entrance of the 6th boss's temple, there is a mandala above the door as well as at the top of the pillars. There is also 2 on the floor on the inside of the temple. Inside the 8th boss's temple, there is a mandala above one of the doors. For the 13th boss, there is a mandala on the floor of the small desert temple. For the 16th boss, the floor outside of the gate features a mandala as well. It is also arguable that the central plate on the 3rd boss's platform is a mandala, as well as the top of the gazebos at the 12th boss's arena, though that's less obvious in the remastered version. The basic meaning behind these symbols, I think, can be easily surmised. If real-life cultures use mandalas as tools to bring chaos and order, consciousness and unconsciousness, light and darkness into balance, then it can be inferred that the ancient culture which once existed in the Forbidden Land used them for the same purpose. However, unlike our reality where mandalas hold little utility beyond their beauty and symbolism, Shadow of the Colossus uses mandalas for much more divine purposes. I'll explain what I mean by that in a moment, but I want to return to the mandalas that Wisi discovered on the preview disc. These images all stem from one illustrator, a man named Robert Flood, who drew them circa 1610. To truly appreciate what these mandalas mean and what story they are trying to tell, it is necessary to give a bit of background to who Robert Flood was. Robert Flood was a scholar of math, chemistry, and medicine. What he is most remembered for, however, was his interest in Hermeticism. For those who don't know what Hermeticism is, pay attention here because this is very important. In the simplest terms, the goal of Hermeticism was to discover a single true theology, one whose strands are seen in all religions. If you have ever heard the maxim that all religions are a pathway to God, that maxim likely had some inspiration from Hermeticism. What it seems Robert Flood was trying to do was find the truth in religious scripture and marry that with the early principles of science so that in theory, the world could congregate around one superior religion. One of Flood's major works that centered around creating this Hermetic practice was titled The Metaphysical, Physical, and Technical History of the Two Worlds, namely the Greater and the Lesser. It was in this book that several of Flood's mandalas are found. Unfortunately, the whole book is written in Latin with no English translation that I could find. At first, I didn't know how I was going to be able to determine what these images meant, but by pure luck, I came upon a paper that outlined what some of these images mean. It was a graduate thesis by Dante Diotalevi, titled A Modern Interpretation of Robert Flood's Symbolic Illustrations. Of the 22 images, Dante was able to outline what 6 of them meant. The 6 you see right now are, according to Flood, how the universe came to be. The first image demonstrates what the universe looked like at the beginning of time. At first, there was nothing. The darkness principle. In the second image, the light principle, or God, sent his spirit out into the darkness to craft the universe with the phrase fiat lux. Fiat lux in Latin means let there be light. The third image demonstrates the light penetrating the darkness and vice versa. The picture takes the form of a circle because supposedly a perfect circle symbolizes both the mathematical harmony of the universe as well as the perfection of its creator. Before I describe the fourth image, I must now introduce one of Flood's other theories, the tripartite division of matter. Flood believed that the universe, and by extension the Earth, was created by the light principle acting upon the dark principle. From the intermingling of these two principles came what Flood called the waters, or rather the Spirit of the Lord, which made up the passive matter of all substances in the universe. The following 3 images describes what matter came first from light and dark. Here's a quote from Dante. Within the circle of light, matter begins to diversify and distill according to relative density. We see one intermediate stage when the entire created universe is bound by aether, only to give way to the indefinite boundary of fire within the elemental realm. This becomes the sublunary realm of the 4 classical elements, earth, wind, fire, and water. The principles of darkness and light mix into a gradient, with the innermost region being the heaviest and the darkest. To put things in the simplest of terms, Flood seemed very concerned with the properties of pure light and pure darkness, and what could come of the intermingling of these two properties. Specifically, what would come if both properties were both brought into balance. To use Flood's terms, the macrocosm of the universe was a perfect harmony of mathematical precision. The human being was a smaller reflection of the universe, or a microcosm. By reconciling our inner opposites of good and evil, light and darkness, chaos and order, we might build an inner harmony, an inner balance that reflects the macrocosmic harmony. In religious terms, this end result might be classified as heaven, enlightenment, Valhalla. Diotalevi cited a picture which illustrates this balance. The light of God descends towards the earth, and the dark cone ascends from the earth. By bringing God's light and all the goodness it embodies into perfect balance with our darkness and sin, our inner moral symmetry would reflect the mathematical symmetry of the universe. As above, so below. The thing I want everybody to focus in on here is the fact that human beings, the microcosm, are imperfect. I theorize that what Shadow of the Colossus proposes is what would happen if human beings were able to wield the properties of light and darkness. The game seems to propose that we would use them for immoral ends. If you want to know what these ends comprise of, I recommend you watch one of my previous videos on Shadow of the Colossus, both of which I will display on screen at the end of this video and link in the description box below. To me, it seems that the culture which once inhabited the Forbidden Land found a way to extract the light half from a human being and use that light to create unimaginable things. Everything from small objects like the ancient sword to large creatures like the colossi. Of course, the price of extracting this light half was leaving a human soul to the Shadow Realm to be ruled over by the demonic Dorman. The pure barbarity of this practice would be enough to make this land forbidden. But worse, what if enough souls were sacrificed to the Lord of Darkness and everything darkness symbolizes? Evil, death, misery? Maybe the world might end. Maybe that is what Lord Iman feared. However, there was also the possibility that light and darkness could be used for good. Maybe there was a greater balance of light and darkness that could lead to a closer relationship with the macrocosmic divine. I think we see the best example of this at the end of the game. Lord Iman drops the ancient sword, made of light, into a pool of water. The dark half of Wander's soul combines with the light in the pool of water. The result was a baby, but not just any baby, a baby with horns. As noted by other Shadow of the Colossus fans, in some cultures, horns were a sign of divinity. I think a fair way of interpreting Wander's rebirth and the horns was that Wander succeeded in bringing his microcosmic being into closer harmony with the macrocosm, with the universe, with God. It was through the great tragedy of killing 16 colossi, dying, being relegated to the Shadow Realm, and then being reborn, that Wander proved his individual worth. For that, he became more divine. Now, where have we seen this type of story before? Where a person dies and is resurrected as a much more divine being. Does the name Jesus ring a bell? It's not like I'm reading Christian theology into SOTC, by the way. We know, for example, that Dorman is literally Nimrod spelled backwards, and Nimrod was a king from Christian mythology. Like with any human endeavor, intentions are usually pure, but our inherent imperfection often turns us away from the path to the light. The ancient culture which once inhabited the Forbidden Land genuinely seemed to want to reconcile their inner being with the divine, hence the littering of mandalas throughout the game. They wanted to feel a wholeness, a oneness, with the universe. Nevertheless, the temptation to wield the power of the gods blinded the denizens of the Forbidden Land to one eternal truth. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Special thanks to Nomad and Wisi for all their work regarding Shadow of the Colossus. If you want to see more explanations regarding the world of this game and its story, click on the video you see on the left. If you want to see how other games made by the same developer might further explain the light/darkness dichotomy in Shadow of the Colossus, click on the video you see on the right. That video will show how The Last Guardian and Eco might share the same universe as Shadow of the Colossus. Like, share, subscribe, you know the drill.